So for those of you that are here with us today, this is the Working in Supportive Housing and Orientation for New Case Managers. As I said at the beginning, this is about a 2-hour training, although I will try to get you out a few minutes at least early so that you can take care of your own personal business for a few minutes before your next task. I'm going to introduce Kaya Kennebrew, who works at the Corporation for Supportive Housing, who I would then like to kick it over to Luz. Kaya will be providing some assistance for us today. And so I'm going to kick it over to her to give the welcome. Oh, you know what I didn't do is tell you who I am. I'm Alice Minervino from the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. I work in the Housing and Homeless Services Unit, and I will be providing most of the training today. There'll be a couple of short videos that hopefully we can, that's where I was having some technical difficulty. Hopefully we can get to those today without any difficulty. So that being said, I'm going to kick it over to Kaya.
Sure. Thank you, Alice. Happy Monday again, everyone. I'm Kaya Kennebrew. Most of you have either seen me or you get emails from me, so I'm usually handling a lot of the logistics for the training. Happy to be in community with you all today. I'm one of the program managers and I oversee our DEMIS trainings. I'm going to go over the logistics for Zoom, and then I'm going to have Luz introduce herself. So we're all familiar with Zoom by now, but I just want to go over, I guess, some Zoom housekeeping. So your mute function is at the bottom left side of your screen. So feel free to come off mute if you have any questions. We want the presentation to be as engaging as possible. So go ahead and come off mute. You also can use your space bar if you're on a PC, so you can mute and unmute yourself. So that's sort of like a little shortcut. If you have video capability, please show your beautiful faces and come on camera. If you don't, just send me a message. I'm gonna chat with Alice probably offline, because I know some folks are having some issues with you don't have audio or video on your camera. So I know it's impacting how you show up at the training. So hopefully we can work on that offline, but just send me a message if you're having trouble with your current device and you can't speak or your camera doesn't work. Next, we're going to also be using the chat feature, which is usually on your right-hand side of the screen. Just make sure next to two, you have it for the drop down, make sure it's going to everyone so that everyone can see your questions. If you do need the private message, just make sure you're private messaging to the right person for the two drop down. I think that's all we have for Zoom logistics. I'm going to pass it over to Luz to introduce herself.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Luz Sasuba, and I'm also a senior program manager with CSH. Happy to see everyone here this morning, Monday morning, on a training. One more thing that I'm noticing is that on your names, some of you are just first names. We want to make sure that we give you credit for attending today. So if you can make sure that your name is accurate on the display, that would be helpful. So anyhow, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of your comments and suggestions at the end of the training. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaya and Luz. So without further ado, we can start the training. So quickly, we'll go through some training objectives. This is going to be the agenda for the day. We'll do some training objectives, the history of supportive housing, housing first and supportive housing. We have a small activity. We'll do a little bit of an overview of DEMIS, the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, a little bit of an overview of the Supportive Housing Quality Initiative, and then a little review of documentation and some guidance we have related to that.
I'm sorry, are we going to get a copy of this PowerPoint, or is this not at the end, or no?
Yes, you'll get a copy. I'll send a copy out along with your certification to say that you completed today's training.
Okay, great, thanks.
No problem.
And as a little preview, you get an extra little bonus document that we'll go over as part of our activity. So you will have some stuff coming to you after today's training. So our objectives are to review the history of supportive housing in Connecticut, the Supportive Housing Coordinated Access Networks, or CANS as they are locally called, the DDAP, which is the DEMIS Data Portal, HMIS, Homeless Management Information System, and a little bit of targeted case management for those agencies that do targeted case management, or TCM. Not all agencies do. So we like to do a little quick, brief introduction to it in today's training, but there are targeted case management trainings specific for agencies that do it. We'd like you to become familiar with the operations of DEMIS and the quality assurance project initiative that we're working on. And then you'll receive some guidance on target dates, our assessment and acuity index, which also has its own separate training for those of you who haven't taken it. How to complete service plans, which is another standalone training, and progress notes. So any questions or comments before we move on? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on. So the history of supportive housing started in Connecticut almost, I saw this earlier today, almost 30 years ago, which seems sort of shocking to me, but is actual truth. One of the first buildings that was opened as a supportive housing building in Connecticut was Liberty Commons in Middletown. And the funding for that building and the services was applied for to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the federal department, back in 1993. It took a few years to actually build the building and open in 1995. There was, at that time, several buildings, 9 throughout the state of Connecticut, as the first initial foray into supportive housing in Connecticut. Since then, Connecticut and the nation has used the single site models as one thing for supportive housing, one option, and the other, which a lot of you are probably familiar with, is the scattered site model, which includes a housing subsidy, whether it's a RAP or Section 8 or a HUD-funded rental assistance program voucher, and a service component, which is often funded through the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. So a person is offered a affordable housing unit plus the services that go along to help them maintain and grow and work towards goals while they're in supportive housing. So Liberty Commons was the first. I actually need to update this slide because at the time when I started this, when I made this slide, Geller Commons in New Haven, Hamden line was the most recently opened supportive housing building, but since then a few others have come online. Sometimes buildings are built from scratch, and sometimes they're buildings that were purchased and rehabilitated. So Geller Commons was a brand new building. The other 3 on the screen were buildings that were rehabbed. So whether it's building a unit from scratch or rehabbing some older buildings, sometimes there's problems that come along with construction, problems that come along with rehab. So they do take quite a while to get built. But it is a collaboration between a lot of partners. And so, you know, and to the end goal is having people exit homelessness to a safe place to live. So I'm going to stop there. If anyone has any questions about our history, it's long and varied, and along the way we started to work with CSH to provide some quality. We wanted to make sure that people were getting quality services, agencies were getting the support they needed. So our initiative with the quality assurance includes monitoring or doing a site visit, wherein we find areas that globally throughout the state might need some extra support. And then we created this learning environment, the training catalog, from some of the things that we found during the site visits. We also are working towards, and it's been a little difficult in the last 2 years, as you can imagine, to do learning collaboratives, but we're moving back to that space where we can have learning collaboratives and providers each share best practices with one another. And so the quality initiative really is to ensure that someone who is living in New Haven and getting supportive housing services, if they decide to move to, say, Putnam, they're going to get like services. So the idea is that no matter who your service provider is, what your service, where you are located in your apartment, you're going to get like services from the service provider. So in Connecticut, and this is a best practice that HUD really, HUD and the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, really promote, and we all believe in, is housing first. There is a definition for housing first that, I don't know if it's on the next slide. Nope. It's kind of lengthy, but basically it's a proven method of ending all types of homelessness and is the most effective approach to ending chronic homelessness. Housing First offers individuals and families experiencing homelessness immediate access to permanent, affordable, and supportive housing without prerequisites like completion of treatment or evidence of sobriety, and a low threshold of entry. So Housing First yields higher retention rates, lower returns to homelessness, and significant reductions in the use of crisis services and institutions. So there's actually this very nice video that was developed for Housing First and what it kind of entails. So here's where I want everyone to help me with the technology gods, because I'm going to try and get it up for you so we can play it. So bear with me. Can everyone see the Housing First video?
No.
Ooh, okay.
Not
All
the
right.
video.
I'm hitting play, and hopefully we can hear it.
No, I don't see it.
I'm sorry. Someone said they don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either.
It might be, are you sharing your full screen, Alice? Because we may only still just see the PowerPoint. You might have to share your full screen and then make sure you have share sound too once you go to share your screen.
Let me. Sorry, my oh gosh. Sorry. Kaya, what do I need? I'm sorry. What do I need to do?
So when you go to share screen, you just make sure there's a little box at the bottom left to make sure you're sharing your sound as well. But then make sure you share, sometimes it allows you to share a window and then you can share your full screen so that even if you switch to a different screen, we still can see it while you're sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we go back to share screen. It should allow you to share your full screen.
How about now?
Yes.
You see socks?
Change. Yep.
Okay, so that's step one. I'm going to hit play, see if you guys can hear me. If not, try and figure the rest out. No?
No sound.
Okay.
In the
So-
sound box on the share screen, it is hit at the bottom to share sound. When you go to share screen, there's a little box at the bottom left-hand side that allows you to also share the sound from any video.
I see it. Okay. Thank you, Kaya.
No problem.
I have young people help me.
So that should, let's make sure. open, you shouldn't have to go out of it and go back
Housing
in.
First has
There we
5
go.
key principles.
We can
If you're
hear
not
it.
following the 5 principles, it's not Housing First. Principle number 1, immediate access to housing with no housing readiness conditions. Participants meet with a support team once per week, but housing is not dependent on psychiatric treatment, abstinence, or other readiness conditions. And when we say no housing readiness conditions, we mean none. Now, many participants stay housed in their first rental, but evictions happen. With the support team's help, it's an opportunity for learning, adjusting, and the immediate chance to try again. Research shows Housing First reduces emergency room visits, hospitalization, shelter use, detox services, and incarceration. There are no common indicators that predict who Housing First will and won't work for. So given its effectiveness, let's focus on Housing First, then let participants tell us the next step.
All of us deserve housing. Everybody on the planet deserves a decent place to live. So it's not about, are you ready? Everyone is ready. And what we find is when people move into their own place, readiness comes.
It made sense to me that really the only readiness for housing was, were we able to sign the paperwork and get the damage deposit, and could they find their way back home? Did they have the capacity to do that? That was housing readiness. And really outside of that, I struggle to understand what it is that you need in order to be housed other than that place, that the door handle to turn and to be able to walk through that threshold.
We've been somehow doing things backwards for a long time, telling people they should work on their addiction and their mental health and do all this paperwork stuff. And then after that, they'll be worthy of having somewhere to sleep.
But you can't not house people for the very reasons they need housing. That's why we say housing first, right? You have to be housed first. And from there, other things can happen.
My perception was that it was outside the realm of possibility. We can't do that. You have to go through these steps that have been laid out for all of us. So it really just reverses the whole system in this radical way. But the thing is that it works. And it works particularly well for people who are experiencing chronic homelessness.
You can't tell from the get-go who's going to succeed or who's going to fail. What you do know from the beginning is if you do it well, you will have a great success with 80% of the people.
For those of us that have ever worked in housing for a while, it's a never list of waiting. So this was amazing to me. It was absolutely amazing. You just sit down and meet somebody and you say, hi, do you need somewhere to live? And it's just like this magic door opens.
The quickness that we got to go past any kind of assessment and straight to getting people in housing was kind of amazing. And I don't think I really appreciated at the time how unique it was. Going out into coffee shops and meeting people for the first time, and the first conversation we were having with them before we were talking about kind of struggles they had or kind of housing history was, where do you want to live? What kind of place you want to go to, and what's the quickest we can get you there?
I think the biggest change I observed in myself in this working with this model was how I needed to throw out some of my beliefs in my incredible ability to predict things, because it was incredible how difficult it was to know who was going to do okay with the project.
We have this piece of paper that says that this person can't live in their home or needs supported housing, yet this person doesn't want to live in that place. What do we do?
There's a whole bunch of people where the story that had been told about them, the mounds and folders of collateral that was coming in, and even their presentation would scream not housing ready. Or, yeah, we're going to be back, we're housing them this time, or, sort of be that inkling in the back of the mind that says, well, maybe we shouldn't put them in the nicest apartment building because that's not going to last. And a lot of those people being in a stable, safe environment, a place that they could actually care about and build something in, completely changed things.
We're just going to have to give these apartments away one person at a time. We're not going to screen. 50 books drop away. We're not going to do any assessments. 100 books drop away. All this knowledge of how do we figure out is no longer being applied in that way.
After like 4 or 5 years of working in this model, that I think that everybody's beliefs about who can live in independent apartments and who can't needs to be revised. I don't think any of the occupational scales that we typically use to determine housing suitabilities, any of the models we have for who should live in what kind of housing, I think they're probably all wrong.
I mean, everyone's very focused on let's predict who can't make it. But in fact, we can't predict who can make it. You know, we really don't know. So we have to give every single person a chance to demonstrate what they can do in that new environment.
I'd meet people and just think, oh, this guy's going to get housed. Within 2 months, he's going to have a job. He's going to graduate from the team. And that would not be the way things would go at all. And then I'd meet somebody and think, this is really going to be a challenge. 2 months later, I'd be sitting in their apartment, having a latte with them, with the espresso machine they just bought. I mean, there was no way of knowing at all.
As staff, we just need to let go of the idea that we know everything and you know, realize that we don't know anything. And, you know, what we're there to do, if we're running Housing First programs, is to give people a chance, right? We don't know. So we got to be there to support people no matter what, get them in there, and whatever happens, happens, and we deal with it. But, you know, we can't predict how people's lives go.
In housing in the past, if you blew it, you sort of blew it and you're out again and you're back into that cycle. So I think that's what worked with Housing First, is that you don't blow it, you try again.
The model expects, I wouldn't say expect people to fail, but expects to have challenges along the way. And with the model, I mean, evictions are common, right? And that's part of the model, that people get evicted and then, you know, you put them in a new apartment and you look at ways to be successful. And that's what we found. We found a lot of people didn't make it in their first apartment. And I would say that, you know, we had a very, very challenging population.
We were very upfront with landlords. So it's not a housing only program, it's a Housing First program. And so we basically said, we're not going to promise problem-free tenancy, but what we are going to promise is responsiveness.
Continuing to have choice even in the face of failure. So, which is when it's most difficult to continue to give people choice. They just crashed out of their first apartment, and you have spent an enormous amount of time helping them set up in that first apartment, and there's an enormous disappointment on everybody's part. But let's not confuse what our job is to the experience of the person who actually lost the apartment. The disappointment is theirs. I mean, they failed. We're there to support them through that failure, not to punish or judge. And how do you sustain that kind of belief that they can do better the next time?
And we found that most often people learned from their first experience, and if things didn't go well, they certainly went well in their second apartment. And the support teams are key. Once we sort of found the housing and someone chose where they wanted to live, that was the next phase where it was absolutely vital.
And so I think the difference is, by putting them into apartments, is you're really giving people something that they can work with and make changes with and go forward in their lives, which is different than, I think, just recurring shelter use.
At the end of the day, there's a need for shelters, emergencies, crises, unexpected stuff does happen, and you need a foot in the door, a way in, where you can't, you know, give a month's notice, or sort of all of the parameters that come with renting places. But shelters are not where people need to be generally. People need to be in housing that makes sense to them.
Especially folks who have systemic barriers to why they're not housed, right, in terms of colonization, poverty, misogyny, you know, the murder of Aboriginal women in this country and Canada. Like, all of these things stacked up against folks. You don't fix that first. You house people first.
So I don't know, can you guys hear me? Okay, good. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for helping me with the technology gods. So that was just a sort of not as quick as it's a little bit of a longer video, but really does talk about housing first and the idea that people are entitled to a place to live, and that really having someone who's experiencing homelessness have a place to live and then work on the goals that they need to work on that may have impacted their homelessness, whether it's a mental health disorder, a substance use disorder, very low income or no income, limited education so that their income is also then therefore could be limited, is really the idea of housing, is the idea of housing first, that we offer somebody a affordable place to live, work on their services, and know that, in a lot of life, it's not an easy, just straight trajectory. As they said in the video, there may be some ups and downs. People might get evicted. People might have difficulty with neighbors when they first move in, or even after years of living in an apartment. There is, a lot of issues that have probably impacted people who are currently or previously have been experiencing homelessness. I see a question in the chat. I just want to grab that real quick. Oh, somebody was just apologizing that they had themselves unmute. Thank you. It's hard in this virtual world to remember to do everything and hope that everything works out right the way you want it to. So thank you for the apology, but I think we all understand as we move forward. Now, why isn't this moving forward? Oh, there we go. So housing first is maximizes tenant choice. Tenants can make their choices without judgment. We have to understand that risk is part of human experience. There are going to be things that do impact a person, and we need to intervene. Help, the idea is to help people understand their rights and their obligations, and then have meaningful input into their goals and objectives. In the larger training, we do talk about that, but service plans really need to be based on the client's wishes are, whether or not the case manager may think that those are the appropriate or the best areas to look at, but it does need to be tenant choice. So here's a definition of supportive housing. Where you are going to get these slides, I don't like to read every word on slides. I think it's kind of very bold for you. But in the next slides, we'll talk a little bit about what supportive housing on the case manager side looks like. So you guys are really advocates. I think I started my career being a case manager. One of the things I really loved about case management is that no 2 days were ever the same, and no two issues were similar sometimes, but never the same. So you guys are there to advocate for your tenants. You're there to support them in the things that they want to do, and their connections to resources. A lot of times, case managers are the single point. You're the sort of the center of people calling you. Other case managers, clinicians, landlords, housing coordinators, housing providers might call you. So it's really kind of you're central to a lot of the stuff in helping people connect with other resources and stay in and helping them get into treatment and stay in treatment. I know some of you might provide rides or income to get people rides, so that you really are the conduit. Being a case manager really does call for a lot of creativity and flexibility and teamwork. One of the things we talk about in a training that we have for the supervisors is individual supervision is really great, but also team supervision or group supervision is really great, because people then you have your own internal learning collaboratives. And for folks who have been doing the work for a long time, they may have suggestions and ideas to help people who are new to the field or who have new experiences. You know, obviously we want case managers to be friendly, but you know, really we, just like any job where you're working with other human beings, you really want to contain your boundaries. You know, if you're having difficulty with things, that's where we encourage supervision, to talk to your supervisor about, you know, if you're feeling boundaries being, you know, pushed, or you're feeling, you know, stuck in situations, that's where the place where you can talk to your supervisor about how to unstick things, or maybe help you establish better boundaries with the tenant if you feel that that's necessary. And really, and especially, I think, you know, in the environment with which we've been working for the last couple of years, really look at burnout, really look at some self-care options for yourselves. I encourage everyone to take their vacation when they need to, and if you know, don't answer emails or calls or texts while you're on vacation. People do need to really have time to themselves, and that includes the case managers, right? So it's really important. I think you guys have very, very tough jobs, very fulfilling jobs, but you also, you know, want to be able to take care of yourselves. I have a sign in my office that says you can't pour from an empty pitcher. So I always try to remember that. You know, when you give and give and give, you don't replenish, you have nothing left to give. So some basic principles of supportive housing are that you meet people where they are, where their needs and interests are. Be respectful, especially around client choice. As I said, sometimes if we were in real life, I'd probably ask people to raise their hands if you ever had a tenant or someone you were working with who you felt wasn't doing something that was in their best interests, or that, you know, there might have been another goal that you would have picked as a higher priority. I think that happens to all of us. And we have to kind of, as they say in motivational interviewing, roll with it, and kind of figure out ways to continue to talk about the other things that may be impacting where they are, or they might want to think about putting as a higher priority at some point. Use empathy. I mean, I think, you know, all of us that are in this field, or most of us in this field, are very empathic. And so you wouldn't probably be doing this work if you weren't. You know, we have to recognize that there are differences amongst us, and really, you know, I think recognize and appreciate that, and be self-aware of your own emotions and attitudes. I mean, sometimes things, you know, us as human beings, we react to, and it impacts us in ways we don't always think that it will. And so again, use your supervision for that, sort of how to talk through that, how to work through any of that in your own professional experience. So case management support, I think this is a great sort of analogy, is that case managers are there to help people learn how to ride on their own. Case managers are there to help support people if they're having difficulties, or analogy of the bike, falling down. Again, if we were in real life, I might ask folks to raise their hand that who knows how to ride a bike the first time they rode the bike with no assistance. It's, I think, a very rare situation. And so sometimes people need that that help, that support. And then eventually what we would like to see is that the person is riding their bike, living their life with very limited or no support. So I'm going to pause there, and then we have our first activity that we can do. So I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions in the chat, or folks want to raise their hand. Okay, I'd like to give time for typing and finding the raise hand feature, but hearing none or seeing none, we're going to play a little game, and this does require folks maybe entering in chat. But if folks could first, does anyone know what HMIS stands for? Little hint, I think I gave it away at the beginning of the training about half an hour ago.
Is it homeless management information services?
Homeless management information system. So
Oh,
you got
yeah.
that 75%, which in my book is fantastic. Anybody want to raise their hand or put in the chat what DEMA stands for? Also, I think I gave that one away a little earlier.
Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services.
Yes. All right, here's one I didn't give away, HR. Okay, so, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Human resources?
So I was gonna say, a lot of these acronyms, sometimes they have double meanings. So human resources is a pretty common one, but also in supportive housing, we refer to harm reduction, and some people refer to as HR. So sometimes you have to use context to help you with these acronyms, which is not always fun, right? So anybody want to shout out or chat BNL?
By nameless.
Yes. Anybody CVH? Connecticut Valley Hospital, which is the state-run mental health hospital in Connecticut. It's in Middletown. So there may be folks that you're working with have either come from Connecticut Valley Hospital or need to go, depending on the severity of their mental health disorders or how acute they may be in crisis. RAP.
Rental assistance program.
Yep, which is the state administered Section 8. I don't know why I just said the word behavioral. The state administered rental assistance program. Often it's like people call it the state Section 8, and that is run through State Department of Housing, and they contract with D'Amelia and Associates, John D. D'Amelia and Associates in Waterbury to do the paperwork and inspections for the RAP program. Sharon put in the chat, rental assistance program, correct? COC?
Continuum of care.
Yep. Now, also fun fact of Connecticut, there is the agency called Continuum of Care, and the Continuum of Care steering committees and entities that HUD requires to be able to receive Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development funds. So there is maybe some confusion with that too. So depending, again, you might have to use context. The Continuum of Care, the agency provides mental health services throughout mostly New Haven and Fairfield County. And then the Continuum of Care that HUD requires, as I said, are collaborative entities where people work together to apply for and administer the funds provided by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD, to be able to give rental assistance subsidies, rapid rehousing subsidies, and services to folks experiencing homelessness. And finally, PSH.
Permanent supportive housing.
Permanent supportive housing, yep. Yep, thank you, Steve and Jarrell. I hope I'm saying Jarrell's name right. So the takeaway that I kind of mentioned earlier is going to be when we send out the PowerPoints. Thank you. When we send out the PowerPoints, we will send out a list of a fuller list, like a lot of the acronyms that we use a lot throughout supportive housing, so that we always call it alphabet soup. And so when you're in a meeting, if someone's saying something with an acronym that you don't understand, you can go back and look at your trusty list. Also, we've been trying to be better and more inclusive with folks who are new, or this is not like second nature to them, of saying the full name before using the acronym, because it is hard to, if this isn't the language that you talk about every day, it's very hard to remember all these acronyms. There's quite a lot of them. Before I move on, any questions or comments?
Yes, what was BLN, BNL stands for again?
Yep, that's the by name list. And that is the list.
I'm sorry,
that,
you said it so fast.
I'm sorry, by name list.
By name list?
Yep.
This is Brenda that's speaking. I'm sorry.
That's okay, Brenda. And I talk fast. So if anyone is like, whoa, call me out on it. I'm totally fine with that. So the by name list is the list by which people are put on to receive housing subsidies or rental rapid rehousing subsidies or permanent support housing subsidies. That's generated usually through the HMIS system and kind of created by the coordinated access network that you're working with and the person wants to live in when they get into an apartment. So it's the way in which we're actually getting there in a few minutes. The way in which people enter the homeless system to receive services, and that's how they're listed on the by name list for services and housing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before I move on? Anyone need me to slow down my speech? I do apologize. And I've had some coffee, so that doesn't always help with my
Now, the by name list, would that be through 211?
Right. So the person would call 211. They would be given a quick, not a quick, but an over the phone assessment. If it's found that they need things that are outside of what the 211 system can offer, sometimes they have utility assistance, or if a person's not necessarily experiencing homelessness but might need referrals to utility assistance or a mental health authority, rather than have them enter the homeless system, we try to divert them within the call to 211. But if it's found they really do need shelter or permanent supportive housing, they're then assigned a fuller assessment within their coordinated access network. And then once that happens, excuse me, their information is put into HMIS, and that's when their name will enter the by name list for housing options that they are eligible for. So it's a sort of, so it does start with 211. Is Stevenson your first name?
Yes.
Okay. It's always hard on the chats because some people's get reversed, or not on the chats, on the little bottom things. So that's how folks get on the by name list, is going through that 211 and then the coordinated access network assessment. So that is how it starts.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay. There seems to be a lag in my computer today. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Supportive Housing Quality Initiative. It's a review of the programs that Demas funds. And really, as I said earlier in the day, it's to really ensure that the people who are receiving services are getting like services throughout the state, that you guys as the case managers and program staff are getting enough support to be able to provide the services that we'd like you to provide. And if not, what are things that the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services or CSH can kind of offer to help move the services into better quality, so that people have a better quality of life, the tenants that we serve. So we really, I think a lot of us, and I always say this, Connecticut is a very A+ kind of state. All of you guys, I know everyone wants an A+, but sometimes there are areas where we haven't provided, Demas hasn't provided enough training, or we haven't provided enough background or things to help agencies get to that A+. And so it's not a gotcha. It's not a, like, if you don't do well, we're going to unfund your programs. It's really a way to ensure that the services are being delivered to the tenants in the best possible way, and also sort of a quality check on our end to make sure we're providing enough to you and your agencies and your staff and your supervisors to be able to provide those services. So as I said earlier, we have reviews, so we don't call them audits. We're trying to get away from the word monitoring. It's really more of a site visit, a way to look at things and provide support. From that, we, Demas and CSH, provide technical assistance to areas that might need some more support. As I talked about earlier, if there are areas the agencies are really doing well at, we try to do learning collaboratives so that other agencies can learn from those best practices. And then we look at the assessment and acuity index, which really helps develop a plan for the tenants. So all the things that we kind of look at are to, again, bolster the services that are provided to the tenants and ensure that they're getting the best quality, and ensure that you guys as a staff are getting the best support you can from your agencies and from the department which funds your agencies for these services. So we are in the process, and Luz, I'm so glad she's here, is going to be helping us. So in the past 2 years, obviously, there's been a real paradigm shift in the way work is being done. It's still being done virtually in some places. It's really hard for big groups to have gotten together over the last 2 years. So we really decided to do a couple of things, is look at more of the data that is being put into DDAP and the Demas's data portal and the homeless management information system, to really use a data approach to looking and doing the monitoring, the site visits. We'll still continue to look at charts and do some surveys of the tenants and the staff to see where there are things that could be improved on our end. So we're shifting our the way we're doing a bit of the site visits, the monitoring, to be more less about checking off boxes to make sure that people have done things that they need to do, but really looking at the quality piece of what they're doing. So there's going to be more to come on that. For those, there's going to be a pilot. There's going to be a pilot of a few agencies to see if what we've kind of developed is going to get us what we need in the next year. And if we have to tweak it along the way, that's what we'll do. But we will be doing the monitoring again in its robust way, just a little bit different. There won't be so many people coming to your agencies to look at charts and meet with folks. It'll be a little bit more virtual and a little, like I said, a little bit more on the quality piece, not so much the quantity. Luz, I would like to give you an opportunity if you have anything you want to say about the site visits and the quality initiative.
I think more importantly, we want to look at it as more as a collaboration with the agencies and have them identify what were their difficulties, especially due to COVID. We really want to just hear them and like you said, not look at it as what didn't they provide, but what can we assist in the quality of the work improving. So I think changing the way we look at things is a positive, but we also want to support the staff that are doing such important work. And I think this is a really good way of looking at things. The other thing that we're very excited about is we're also looking at it as you know, who are you providing the services to? What those individuals look like. For the first time, and I think Alice, you can agree, we're looking at race, and that's exciting for us. We're looking at what those the individuals that you're looking at every day, what do they look at? So that's something excited that it has never been done.
Thanks, Luz. And as Kai said in the chat, you know, we don't want to have a punitive approach. We really want to provide opportunities for improvement and growth. So I agree with that 100%. So, you know, one of the things, and I talked about this earlier in the day, is, you know, we have Demas and CSH worked collaboratively with the providers, all of you and your predecessors, really, because it was probably about 10 years ago that we worked on the Assessment and Acuity Index. We've tweaked that in the past year or so to make sure that it's really a reliable tool to use. And so we use the Acuity Index to help with, you know, we wanted to help with service planning, caseload distribution. So, you know, one case manager doesn't get everyone who has really high needs, and another case manager get everyone who has really low needs. You know, so really balancing out people's day-to-day. And then we use it as an opportunity for folks who have been in housing and really have sustained themselves well and want and would like to move on and just have an affordable apartment and not necessarily the intense services. I see a chat, so I'm going to stop for one quick. Totally. Oh, thank you. Luz totally agrees. So service planning, again, there's a whole training on that, but it's really turning people's service needs into actionable goals. It's all based on tenant choice, and it's specific and time limited. We on the PowerPoint, you'll be able to link to the quality page on the CSH website. There's documentation there. There's sample forms that you guys can use. There's links to the assessment and acuity. For any form that Demas has provided, including the assessment and acuity, we ask that nothing be removed from the document, but things can be added in. So like if your agency wants their logo on it, absolutely, you know, take whatever logo, or if there's no logo, put one on. If there's questions your agency needs to have asked for, like your electronic health records or things like that, you can add that on. We just ask that things don't get taken off, especially on the assessment and acuity, because that may impact the scoring, which would not be helpful. So forms, documents, and trainings, that's all also on the CSH quality page. There's
Alice.
Yes.
Sorry. I have a question about the impurity. So you said don't take anything away. What if we leave it blank, if it's not pertaining to the client? Can we leave it blank?
On the acuity?
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't pertain to the client, we ask that you put a 3. So that's the highest score, because that means they don't need a service. They don't need assistance with that particular piece. So that comes up a lot with especially individuals who don't have children or family living with them.
Mm-hmm.
So we always, I mean, this is covered much more in the assessment training, and hopefully y'all will be there. I'm going to do that one as well. But if there's no service need attached to what that question is, it should be a 3.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Nope, no problem. So there's a lot of information on CSH's website related to the forms and training and documentation. Demas also has a supportive housing homeless services page where there's a lot of information. Very exciting stuff when you have your free time, or Saturday night and you just want to really buckle down and get more work in. Go to those go to those links and you'll have all kinds of fun. So Demas does have some service guidelines we'd like, we expect folks to do. The first contact of meeting with someone, either, in person or virtually in the space we're in, is within 10 days of that person being admitted into the program. So it doesn't necessarily mean within 10 days of them being housed. Sometimes you get referrals of people who aren't housed yet, but are looking for housing. So we ask that you, within 10 days, meet with them at least once. Progress notes are done within a week of service delivery. We ask that because, sometimes if you don't write it down right away, you forget it or you forget details. So we really do ask for that. The assessment and acuity is within 30 days of the person moving into their unit. So you might have someone on your caseload for a few months before they actually move in. The assessment and acuity isn't done until they've moved into their apartment, and then you have 30 days to do that. And then service plans are done within 60 days after the completion of the assessment and acuity. So we really ask that the assessment and acuity be done first, and then the service plan is done based on the information that's in the acuity index. And for those of you who haven't taken the acuity index training, we really get into that a lot more in depth. The tenant guide is done at admission and annually and signed. We ask that people be contacted at least twice a month. Now, that means that we ask you to try and contact them, right? So if we were in real life, I'd ask this question: how many people have ever gone to someone's apartment or tried to call them and gotten no answer, voicemail, no text return? The idea is that you're reaching out to them at least, not necessarily there's always direct contact. If there's prolonged periods of time with no contact, that should be something you're bringing up with your supervisor and during supervision to kind of think about different strategies, or kind of making sure that the person is okay by doing a health and safety check, or having the police do a health and safety check. I do see a question, so I'm gonna read that. Steve says, forgetting details with progress notes is something I struggle with sometimes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, especially with the day-to-day issues, right? Like, it's really hard when you have like 3 people that are having kind of crises at once, or you're doing multiple things and, time slips by and you think, when did I meet with them? When did I talk with them? I mean, I've absolutely been there. So that's why it's really, we really try to stick to that timeline so that the details stay as fresh as possible. Yeah, or drama or fighting, right? The assessment of the unit. So this is not a housing quality inspection that is done by the housing provider, but we ask that you at least every 6 months kind of just make sure, if you can, get into the tenant's apartment and see if there are things that would be impacting their health and safety. I say this all the time, you live in your own house, you live in your own space, and things that, you think, oh, that leak has been going on forever. I just don't want to call the plumber to have it fixed, or I don't want to fix it myself. But if you go to the tenant's apartment and there's a leak, they may think they may say, oh, it's like not a big deal, but we really should be contacting the landlord so that they can fix it, because, especially leaks start off small, they can really quickly go from, 0 to 60 and cause a lot of damage. I tell a story of, I went to a tenant's apartment once, and he had, this was a long time, he had a landline that had a wire, and the wire went across in front of his doorway to his bathroom. And he's like, oh yeah, well, I know it's there, so I always know to step over it. And I thought, yeah, you do, but like, what if you have a guest that's over and they don't see it? Like, there's a lot of, that was really ripe for some, potential somebody getting hurt. So, it's just things like that where if you live there, or if that's your own space, you might not recognize it as something that's not in the best interest. So really just to kind of look at that for folks. Anything that's deferred on the assessment acuity, anything the person says, yes, I know I need assistance with that, but I don't want to put it on my I don't want to put it on my service plan right now. We ask that people talk about it when they meet with folks. They don't have to bring it up every time, but really just try to maybe again show them the importance of, or why it should be something that's prioritized. And then we will, people do get discharged from the program either successfully, they've moved on to just a housing voucher, no services, or they've moved on to a different location. So we just want to have people to be mindful about discharge. And we do ask that there's a 3-month discharge follow-up, whether or not it's to another agency or to another program, just to make sure that the person is doing well for at least 3 months after they've moved on from your services. So I'll pause here really quickly for any questions.
I got a question. When a client is gotten housed, is there any assistance for that client if the client suffers from substance abuse addiction, and what goes into play when that client doesn't want to admit that they have a problem, or they just don't want to get or they just don't want to get clean? I've heard a couple of cases where it's like someone was housed, but then they lost their housing because they're spending all their money on drugs when they should be using it for the rent. So, and I'm wondering.
Yeah, and that's I think the part in which where you would use the motivational interviewing, or the skills that you have to really talk with somebody about using a harm reduction model. I understand that you're not really ready to go to substance abuse treatment, or you don't think that you need substance abuse treatment. However, the last 2 months, your portion of rent didn't get paid because you use that money for other things. What if we put a plan in place that on whenever day you get paid, we before the first 10 days of the month, we sit down together and pay your landlord, and then at least your rent is paid and you're not going to get evicted from the apartment, and then the money is yours. The rest of the funds are yours to do with what you wish. I wouldn't suggest using them all on substances, but at least we know that you've been housed for the next month. Again, it's one of those things where we want you to talk to the tenant about the fact that there's been consequences to the use of their substances. They've gotten in fights, they've gotten arrested, they haven't paid their rent. To see if there's any of those things to motivate them to go to treatment, or at least lessen their usage. But we can't make someone stop. But those are things to kind of talk to them about and ways to figure that out. And again, as we talked about earlier, it's really tenant choice. And sometimes we don't necessarily agree with that, but we can try and support in the best way we can a choice we don't always agree with. So this is just a copy of a progress note that we think works well. It's got the date that you wrote the note, the date that you provided, how long the contact was, where it was, who is doing it, any service goals, and then the narrative. Now, obviously, these look very, very small, but you can type in and make the areas as big as you need to for whatever things you need. Also, it does say service plan goal addressed. If we were in real life, I'd raise your hand and say, how many times did you go to meet with someone thinking you were going to talk about the service plan, and before you get there, they've had some crisis come up and you need to deal with the crisis rather than like the service goal plan. That is absolutely the right thing to do. on the note, you could just say, you know, crisis took the majority of our time. We did not address the service goal plan at this time. We will do it next time. So it's really acknowledging that, you know, life happens, right? Like someone gets a flat tire or someone's heat is shut off, even though they've paid their bills, or, you know, lovely, we live in New England, and so the wind is blowing and the lights go out for 2 days and they've lost all their food. So it's really about kind of, as I said earlier, just rolling with a lot of stuff, and but just acknowledging that that's what happened. You know, I think the old adage that if it's not written down, it didn't happen is usually pretty accurate, right? Like you can't substantiate something if you don't write it down. Progress notes. I'm not going to read this to you, but it's really about who provided what, why, any barriers, you know, the tenants' awareness to issues. I think to Steve's point, if someone's saying they don't need or want treatment, and as you talk with them, you know, week after week after week, and things are changing, they're sort of acknowledging that maybe there is a problem, or they would like some help with something, or they'd like to go to an AA meeting. So you can really see the progress of the work. I also say, you know, hopefully someone will win the lotto or get a different job. And so you want the next person, and I mean, I think, you know, you guys have probably taken over caseloads from other people. You want to know the story when you get the chart, so that you can already have an understanding and some background of what the person is doing and what their issues are, what their barriers are, where their strengths are, so that they don't have to repeat the whole thing to you all over again, or they don't have to, you know, start from scratch, and you don't have to start from scratch. We do, let me answer this chat real quick. Or they say they don't have a need for mental health treatment or psych meds when they've shown erratic. Right. So I think it's just kind of talking with people about like what the evidence of erratic behavior is. You know, they've gotten arrested 3 times in the last month for screaming at people in the streets. I'm making things up here, but you know what I mean? And you can continue to show that that's an incongruency of they feel like everything's fine, yet they've gotten arrested 3 times for screaming at people. There are things that are absolutely, we need critical incident reports, or for folks who work with families who have children under the age of 18. You know, you are mandated reporters for abuse and neglect. So I think we're going to move on to, there's some links we have to different things in the presentation. So this is just an illustration of how the things that the assessment and acuity index and the service plans and the progress notes really are interwoven. So they're three legs of a stool that each impact each other, and then they get braided together to be able to really provide the best services for somebody. So things that are on the assessment and acuity, we talk about wanting them on the service plan if the client so chooses. And then whatever is on the service plan should be addressed when you meet with them. Again, you know, there may be things that come up or things that they didn't expect that they'd like on a service plan. You know, we're working with people. We need to just be fluid, but that should all be addressed in the progress note as you write it. So I talked a little bit about the Moving On initiative. We worked with the Department of Housing. They have rental assistance vouchers, RAP vouchers that are just rental assistance. There's no service component of it. It's for folks who have a desire to move on from the service part of the permanent supportive housing, and have shown with the assessment and acuity index, that they really are doing pretty well. They have a lot of low scoring needs, and so there's not a lot of work that the case manager and they do together. So we have the DOH created a moving on initiative policy and procedure guideline, and one of the things is that if a person is being referred to a moving on voucher, they do want to see the assessment and acuity index for that person. Kind of substantiates that they have really not as many high critical needs as they've had in the past. We're gonna try this again. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's all about the technology gods for me, I guess, today. But there are things that are critical incidents that if something happens, it needs to be reported through the critical incident report on the DEMIS webpage. There's a training, I'm gonna click. There's a training that, here's the critical, the Evaluation Quality Management Improvement Division, EQMI. So there's critical incident reporting that needs to happen. There's some related to just COVID-19. So there's the critical incident reporting guide, the application, so that you can be able to fill out the reports. And so it's, things that are detrimental to the person are considered critical incidents. There's a training, I believe it's further down. There are trainings to be able, you can contact Carolyn Haberlin. There are trainings to kind of determine what are critical incidents. I'm gonna go back to hopefully the PowerPoint. Everyone see the PowerPoint again?
No.
Okay.
Oh.
Hi, I may need your help again.
Okay. Okay, can you go to the next? Because I think I see it. Uh-oh, okay. Resharing. Are we sharing another video, Alice?
No, am I
Okay,
back?
just trying to go back to the, yep. Okay.
Oh.
Try to move your slide now. See if you can move and we see. I want to make sure. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So this is a one of our little activities. It's much, in real life we had a little bit more. We break you guys into groups and things, but so I'm gonna ask that you guys read. You're probably sick of hearing my voice. Read the little descriptor, and then in the chat box, say whether or not you think this would be a critical incident that needs to be reported to DEMIS. So I'll just give you 30 seconds, a minute to read and respond. So looks like overwhelmingly people are saying yes, absolutely. So if anyone would like to take themselves off of mute or raise their hand and tell me why they think yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I recently had a client who passed away starting in January, and that was pretty just touching for me, because that was the first time I had to deal with something like that. And I did do a critical incident report for Inspirica as well as DEMIS, because she was a DEMIS client as well. And I think that's just something that's very important for everyone to be made aware and be put on the same page that the client's no longer with us.
Correct. And Stevenson, I'm really sorry that that happened to you. I remember the first person that I worked with that passed away. And it was a very, very, I mean, I've been doing this work a long time, and I still think of him and remember that. So yeah, exactly. Anytime a person passes away, whether it is an accident, an illness, something else, it is a critical incident report. Just for Stevenson's exact statement, it's that, you know, everyone knows that the person has passed away, and so, you know, sometimes there are things, if someone passes away, they do need to do an autopsy, and it's followed, you know, we ask that you follow up and kind of close the loop on if and when people are found out, you know, the reason that the person passed away is found out, if it was in question when they first died. And it also allows DEMIS the opportunity, if there's something that's happening, to support the staff. You know, with fentanyl and a lot of the overdoses, if something were to happen to an agency, you know, a few times, there might be opportunity to support and provide some debrief training and trauma support to the staff, because that's really impactful when you're working with folks who pass away. So thank you for playing our little game here. We talked about this earlier, but the coordinated access networks, I have to update this because, as you see, it says 7 coordinated access networks, but my little graph has 8 color codes. So if you can imagine Northwest and Southwest being one color, pick either pink or yellow, that's entirely up to you guys in your minds. That is now one can. So all of the state of Connecticut on your right side is one can, and then there are the other 6 cans in Connecticut. And that's really, you know, that determines like the by name list and the service component areas where people can reside or receive their services where they reside. People can move from can to can. I think we talked about that earlier. You know, if someone lives in New Haven, but their family lives in, I think I said Putnam earlier, so we'll say Putnam, and they want to move to Putnam, we really want to help figure out the best way to get them to move to Putnam and get the services they need there. So a person doesn't need to stay within, you know, one single can for the rest of their lives. We really want it to be about client choice and support those choices. So I think we briefly touched on this earlier, is that 211 and the coordinated access networks are the single entryway for folks to get into supportive housing and rapid rehousing and shelter. Back before we had coordinated access networks, it was sort of a first come, first served to shelters. It was, when I first started in this field, people had to fill out multiple applications for housing, depending upon what they were eligible for. If a case manager was new and didn't know all the resources in their community, the client may have only, you know, gotten referred or applied to 1 or 2, where somebody who was a seasoned case manager might know of more options, and they'd have their client apply for more options. HUD really wanted to kind of level the playing field so that, you know, people really only had to fill out one application at one time, and then dependent upon what they were eligible for, they were put on the lists for all of those things. So that's why there's one by name list or BNL for the can, so that that person can be referred to whatever they are eligible for. So here we do have another video. I know for sure that the first few seconds of it don't transition into the video, but eventually it does. So I'm going to play this for you. But first I'm going to read this chat. Oh, Maya, your internet went out. Are you back? I hope. And I hope I'm saying your name correctly.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay, great. No problem. It happens. You saw how my technology has been working today. Well, that's probably user error more than anything. But in any event, I'm going to play the video. And like I said, I know that there's a few seconds where it stays on the slide, but then we do go to the video.
Are held throughout Fairfield County to match the most vulnerable households on the by name list with open housing vacancies from various providers and the correct housing interventions. The meeting facilitator will go through each client who is in need of a housing placement and solicit feedback from the collaborative of housing and service providers as to the most appropriate and cost-effective intervention needed to end the person's housing crisis.
I'm wondering if maybe rapid rehousing could be the avenue that we look for. What's his total income?
His total income is about $950 a month.
What do you think, Sam?
We will cover the security deposit and first month's rent, and then we have our case managers that help them, get more employment, increase their income. We work on budgeting and financial literacy, and that can go for the entire time of their lease. So I think rapid rehousing, will actually be a good fit for him.
That we're going to prioritize that other client for the one bedroom, and we'll prioritize this client for rapid rehousing. If for some reason we put him in rapid rehousing and after several months it doesn't look like he's going to be successful, let's bring it back to housing placement. We can reevaluate and determine, especially if we have another vacancy, we may be able to prioritize him for something different.
So that was just a sorry about that. That was just a little video of what a coordinated access network or housing placement meeting, sometimes they're called different things within the different CANs, what it looked like when people were still meeting in real life, in person. So I guess I've said this a few times, but in the last 2 years, obviously we've pivoted a little bit. But the idea of that sort of collaborative work about placing, talking about what options people have and what are the best options for people is still done. It's just being done virtually right now. But that is the idea, is to match a person to the best option that's out there for them. Yeah. The internet is saying unstable. It just kicked me off, hoping it gets better. Oh, sorry, that was, sorry. So if folks are having internet difficulties, I apologize. This is being recorded, so you can listen to it later or watch it later in its entirety if you do have problems. So there are, DDAP is, as I said, the DEMIS data portal, and then there's HMIS, the Homeless Management Information System. For anyone who receives DEMIS funding, we ask that a requirement is that the service data is entered into DDAP for all of the clients that you're working with. We also ask that all of the housing data be entered into HMIS, Homeless Management Information System. I know a lot of agencies also have electronic health records where a lot of data is entered. And so I know the electronic health records can upload their data into HMIS and or into DDAP. And they can be working together, but sometimes there is programs that need to do dual entry. So they might need to enter into HMIS and enter into DDAP, or enter into their electronic health record to upload to DDAP and then enter into HMIS. But really the idea is that the service end of the work that you do is entered into DEMIS, so that we can do the data analysis of the services that the people are receiving, how often, where, when, etc. And then the HMIS system really is to ensure, where people are housed. So it's related to their housing data. For any of you who work with programs that HUD funds through rental assistance program, the rental assistance program, or through rapid rehousing, there are reports that need to get done annually, and that information is pulled from HMIS. So in Connecticut, Nutmeg Consulting is the agency that administers the data end of the HMIS system, and Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness is the administrator and the agency that receives the the support to help Nutmeg support the work that they do on the technical end of the HMIS. So if there's questions, for HMIS, you can either reach out to Nutmeg or Connecticut Coalition to End Homelessness. If there's questions related to DDAP, that link that brought us to the critical incident page, DDAP is managed by that unit, the Evaluation Quality Management Initiative. EQMI also manages our DDAP for us. So I teased this earlier that we would talk a little bit about targeted case management, or TCM. Not every agency is working with DEMIS on targeted case management, but for those of you that are, there is no difference in the services that you provide to the client. What is different is when you report it to DDAP. If you're a targeted case management agency, you will choose targeted case management codes when you do a targeted case management service for the client. So they're very specific things that you can consider a targeted case management service. Because it's such a there's so many intricacies to the targeted case management, what counts and what doesn't count, and how to document those things. We have set aside 2 learning management system LMS trainings within the DEMIS catalog. That's on our DEMIS website to be taken for the targeted case management agencies. That is also, those can also be found through the DEMIS website. And then because housing has very unique and specific intricacies, I'll use, when doing targeted case management, we have an online, a virtual, like today, 2-hour training, 2.5-hour training related to specific housing questions, ways to document. The requirement is that if you're going to take that TCM training, because your agency is a TCM provider, we ask that you take the first 2 learning management system, the LMS trainings online before you take the in-person one, because that will give you a little bit of baseline knowledge, so that it's sort of like that's 101, and then the virtual training through the DEMIS catalog is like your 201. So we do ask that those prerequisites be taken. I'm going to pause there really quickly if there's any questions. Oh, something. Stevenson is asking how we can get access to this recorded training. So Kaya, can I kick that over to you? Kaya was having difficulty with the internet, so I don't know if she's back or not.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm gonna send, so when I'll just stay off cameras because I don't want our recording to get messed up because my internet for some reason is unstable and I'm in the office. But when I send out the PowerPoint and any other supporting materials for today's training, in addition to your certificate, I also always attach the recording to that email. So you'll receive that with that email with all the other information.
Thanks, Kaya.
No.
We're also trying to be mindful and put the trainings, once they've been completed, on the CT Boss website, which I can put in the link in a minute. And so, you know, while we really appreciate people taking 2 hours out of their day, we also understand it's a lot of information. So we're trying to have these recorded trainings available to folks later on. I also know from my experiences, sometimes when I get an email and there's a link in it, I flag it to look at later, and then 100 other emails come in and I lose that one, or I don't flag it, or I inadvertently delete it. I mean, there's a lot of options I can do. So this is a place, we're going to put things on the CT Boss website as a repository for some of these trainings so people can go and access them later on and don't have to dig through their, don't necessarily have to dig through their emails or, you know, save it and things like that. So we are nearing the end of our training for the day. Let me check the clock. Oh, it's 11. Yes.
Can we get one of those t-shirts?
You like that, huh?
Cause that's what they look at us as, miracle workers.
That's true. That's why it's important for you to take some time for self-care, because I don't actually think there is a title in the whole world that's called miracle worker, except for, wasn't that the name of the Helen Keller, Anne Sullivan book? Other than that, I can't think of an actual title. But send this to your friends and family as a good Christmas and or birthday present idea too. So I'm going to pause here. I'm going to put the chat in the chat, the CT Boss, spit it out, Alice, website link, and I'll let you guys process, think about questions, put questions in the chat, raise your hand, things like that, before we end the day.
I'll also put the evaluation in the chat to Alice for folks to complete the evaluation during this time as well.
Thank you, Kaya.
No problem.
Now, do we get the certifications at the end of this training, or how long does it take? Because the one last week, I didn't receive it yet, so.
Yeah, it's usually about 2 weeks. So I'm prepping probably between today and Wednesday to send out for the 7th, and then you'll get the 14th in like the next week or so. So it's usually about a 2-week turnaround for certificates.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
And as I said at the beginning of the training, Kaya put the link to the evaluation. If you guys could take a few minutes of the rest of the time we have together to complete the evaluation, we'd really appreciate it. This is, you know, work we do to help support you, and so if it's things that you don't feel are helpful, or things that we're missing that would be more helpful, tweaks and ideas for us, as I said, we look at all of the evaluations, particularly the comments, because we want to ensure that we're providing you with the support you need to be able to provide the support to the folks you serve. And so if we're not doing our jobs, it makes your jobs probably harder. And so I want to really help foster a better training for you guys if that you would like. And if there are any other questions or comments, like I said, put them in chat, or raise your hand, or take yourself off of mute, whatever you need to do.
Are these evaluations anonymous? I forget.
I do not see a name. Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Okay.
No problem.
Well, not seeing any questions or folks raising their hands. I want to really thank you all thank you, Stevenson. I want to thank you all for coming and spending 2 hours on a Monday, roughly 2 hours. 2 hours of your morning with me. I know we had a couple of glitches, mostly, as I said, my errors. But I want you to go and take the time that you have left after you finished out the evaluation to do some deep breathing, stretching, take a quick walk if you can. It looks like it's a really beautiful day out. I don't know what the temperature is though. That's been all over the place in my mind. But don't feel that you need to stay on any longer unless you have questions or comments you'd like to make before we end. But as I said, take this couple of minutes and do something nice for yourself and enjoy. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.